Cameron Stewart, Locked on Baylor. You guys just played them. Mountaineer Paul's Wi-Fi wasn't good enough. Couldn't grab him. Darian DeVries leaving West Virginia for Iowa is something that came up recently amongst a lot of platforms that are related to the Mountaineers, where there are rumors, maybe more specifically with West Virginia fans than even Iowa fans, that Fran McCaffrey will no longer be their head coach, whether via retirement or firing, hasn't gotten the job done. They're going to go in a new direction, and that DeVries would be the number one candidate for the Hawkeyes. And it seems like, at least from what you said off the air, there's a good chance Iowa City, that university, has a pull at West Virginia's head man.
So these fascinate me, because 95% of these coaching vacancies that you just hear names thrown out there are like total BS. They're such
Which,
reaches.
by the way, we have determined Scott Drew has accepted the Indiana job, correct?
Correct. Yes, okay. Correct. Brad Stevens will be his assistant at IU. I think that's a good move. I think that's a good move for Brad.
And they're bringing Crean back.
About time. Bo Pelini's going to run the offense for Matt Rule at Nebraska too. But like 95% of these are just like, why would the guy do that? You know, he's had a good job now, or he's been there forever, or this job that they're looking at isn't what it used to be. But then you get these that it's like, oh, this makes some sense, right? Like DeVries is only in year one at West Virginia, which West Virginia, no doubt, is a better basketball school than Iowa, but I wouldn't say it's drastic at this point. Like, Iowa's got a huge fan base. You travel all over the country, Drake. I guarantee you every time you go into an airport, there are people with Iowa Hawkeyes gear on. All the time. They're everywhere. Waste management is littered with them. I know you were there. Iowa fans and Nebraska fans, they're everywhere. And so this is a major university that has not lived up to its potential in men's basketball. They have had good players. With Keegan Murray and Luka Garza winning National Player of the Year, and they can't make it to the Sweet 16. And here's Darian DeVries, an Iowan, who did a tremendous job at Drake University, not Locked on Big 12. Did a great job there. Very hot young coach still, and he has a pretty small buyout. So the buyout at West Virginia is 37.5% of what he's owed. At the time of his leaving. He signed a 5-year deal worth $15 million. So quick math, $3 million a year. So after this year, it'll be 12 that's still owed to him. So Iowa would need to pay like $5 million. Jerome Tang, you gotta pay. You gotta buy the entire state. You gotta pay like $20 million to get Jerome Tang out of that job. And yet you can get a nice, good young coach in Darian DeVries, who's done a terrific job with West Virginia, by the way, even getting them to a point where they can make the tournament without their best player, Tucker DeVries.
Beat Gonzaga, which Baylor could not do.
Beat Gonzaga, beat Kansas. Like this is a good team.
At Kansas.
It's a good team.
Yeah.
And his brother, by the way, Darian DeVries' brother. Where did he play college football? You're not going to
say. Tell me it's Iowa State. That would make this whole thing blow over.
Oh, Cyclone Larry wishes, man. Oh. He was an Iowa Hawkeye.
That's the other side of the Cyhawk.
There is so much pulling them towards that. Now, Fran McCaffrey is not fired yet, but he should be. I mean, what's tying you down to Fran McCaffrey? You know what I mean?
Hey,
what?
7 NCAA tournament appearances in 15 years.
And he still doesn't know that there's a second weekend in the NCAA tournament. He just thinks it's a 1 weekend deal. Yeah. I mean, from an Iowa standpoint, it's a no-brainer, like to head in that direction. Especially considering let me just put it this way. If Iowa gets Darian DeVries, like let's just play this out and they get Darian DeVries, I'm like 90% certain they'll get a better hire than Indiana will in their own conference. Like this Indiana thing, they haven't gotten a good hire, like a real dynamite hire in 20 years.
Was it you that I would say it's Nebraska football? That's what that is.
Yeah. Like on paper, it's still like, it's great in that you'll get a ton of support. It's still a rabid fan base and all that. And there's still a blueprint to win at a place like that. They just can't get anybody. They can't get any coaches. Nebraska was the same way until Matt Rule. Indiana, for all its lore cannot get head coaches. And I have a feeling that they would have to go like 5 or 6 names down the list the way that Kentucky did. But I think, again, Kentucky and Indiana, it's not the same, brother. This is not 1981. Like Kentucky's 6th is better than Indiana's 3rd choice of head coach. And Indiana, to finish this point, it feels they're too big for someone like Darian DeVries. 1 year in the power conference. This is the University of Indiana. Like Mark Cuban's going to be signing this guy's checks. And they're not that good. But how often do you see a guy stay 1 year at a Power 5 or excuse me, a Big 12 program? Like who would that be? I don't know. Brad Underwood. The coach they just had at West Virginia, Bob Huggins and the illustrious Kansas State era. It happens. It does.
Dana Altman's 2 weeks in Arkansas. Leslie, forget. He had a great hog call and then said smell ya. Jim Schlossnagle, the head coach at Texas A&M for baseball there for a bit, who's now at Texas, which is crazy still to me. They lost their first game, thank God. The thing that I would push back on here, I'm not altogether positive Iowa will move on this offseason. They're probably upset, but also you can honestly kind of keep riding the Caitlin Clark thing for a bit and just be like, hey guys, remember how good it was there for a while? Let's just everybody calm down for a second. We had our moment in the sun. Let's not get too crazy yet. And then give DeVries 2 years to prove himself at West Virginia. And then he's the obvious choice. Like if I'm Iowa, I unload the Brinks truck for those guys, for a guy like that. And I don't know. I mean, I would make it hard for him to say yes. That's going to be their goal. Make it hard for him to say yes to West Virginia. That is hard for him to say no to Iowa. And I just want it to happen next offseason if it does, so he can have another year to assimilate and grow comfortable in Morgantown.
That is part of this, that like West Virginia, they're not the richest school in the world, but they can pony up some money. They can make it worth his while to stay. And it is a good basketball school, like in terms of the interest, like it certainly is. And that would really suck for West Virginia because I think they've got the guy here. I'm not saying this is going to be a Final Four team or anything, but I think they've got the guy the way that Tech got Grant McCaslin from a Group of 5 program at UNT. I think he's the one. And it's a weird coaching carousel this year too, because all the Indiana names are guys that are not going to say yes, right? All the names we hear for Indiana are Brad Stevens and Scott Drew, and even Grant McCaslin. I think that's probably a stretch. Fit just seems weird, but for a school like Iowa or West Virginia, if it came to that being a more logical coaching carousel, I'm interested to see what names pop up on those lists.
Coming up, the SEC is soft and bad, and I hate it. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.